Hey everyone. Today on the podcast, Brittni and I are talking about aging and the key qualities that Ayurveda recommends that we prioritize to support our physical and mental vitality as we age. So, we're getting pretty practical here and we're talking about foods and herbs and lifestyle practices, but we're also talking about what it actually means as women to quote, age well, and how perhaps it's time to collectively rewrite that definition altogether. So, as always, thank you so much for being here, and we hope that you enjoy. Welcome to the Ayurveda for Women's Health podcast, where we simplify ancient Ayurvedic wisdom into practical guidance for everyday life. Between the overwhelming wellness trends, quick fixes, and conflicting health advice out there, we return to a science that has been around for thousands of years. I'm Rita, an Ayurvedic health counselor.
And I'm Brittni, an Ayurveda practitioner. In a world that disconnects us from our bodies, we are here to guide you back. Through body literacy, practical tools, and time-tested science, we will help you step boldly into a more empowered, aligned version of yourself. So let's dive in. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Views expressed do not represent our employers.
I hosted an in-person workshop last weekend at my yoga studio. It was called Beat the Heat. And essentially, it was similar content to what we talked about in our Pitta balancing episode 15. But it was super fun to be in person, and I brought a bunch of snacks and some herbal drinks and elixirs, and I brought some herbs, and we made infusions. And yeah, it's always just so fun to be in person as a group. What was really interesting to me, and I feel like every time I do an in-person event, I have this like some kind of a theme or some kind of a big takeaway. And at the end of this workshop, I had a couple people come up to me, and then I also had a couple people email me and all saying similar things of just really appreciating learning Ayurveda or kind of my style of teaching Ayurveda in a very gentle way. And in this way that was very focused on finding middle ground. And so, like, for example, we talked about alcohol at one point and how alcohol can be heating in the summer. And several people in the group were like, yeah, that's a tough one for me. I really enjoy having, my cocktail or whatever it is a few nights a week. I made a grape juice elixir. I don't know if you've ever made that one. It's like fresh grapes and water and ginger and cardamom in the blender. So good. And so, yeah, we were talking about, well, what if we brought that in as the mix with the wine for the sangria and, muddled some mint in the cocktail and brought in some different cooling things. And, also talked about, well, maybe that one night a week, that's a mocktail or whatever it may be. It was interesting because it made me reflect on the very first workshop that I ever hosted. So when we were in Ayurveda school, it was part of our graduation project to host 2 workshops on Ayurveda. And I remember in my first one, I had somebody attend. It was a close friend of mine, brand new to Ayurveda. And she essentially was like, this sounds to me like it would help. Like, this sounds to me like it would all help with all the symptoms I'm having, but I just don't have the time and the space and the energy. It sounds like too much. I don't think I can do all of that. And at that point, she was, I think, a new mom and like just in a phase of life where she didn't have a lot of extra reserve, let's say. But it was just interesting to reflect on. I know it's something we're always talking about on here, but I wanted to bring it to this podcast conversation in that I imagine we have a fair amount of clinicians that perhaps listen in, like health counselors and Ayurvedic practitioners. And I just think it's such a different experience when we talk about Ayurveda that way, because I truly think so many people end up stepping away from it because it just feels like too much, or it feels like something where, oh, well, I can't do Ayurveda because I like to eat takeout or drink alcohol or smoke cannabis or like whatever it may be. And yeah, I do think we're going to all have those clients that come through that are like Pitta constitutions who are like, fast track this for me. I'll do anything, give me a whole plan and I'll follow it to a T. But I think the majority of people aren't going to be like that. And yeah, I just am so passionate about welcoming more people into Ayurveda and that middle ground option and teaching it that way and approaching it that way with our one-to-one clients. At least for me personally, that just really feels like the way to do it. Yeah. So yeah, I've just been really sitting with that and thinking about how that has really shifted throughout my years of learning Ayurveda and teaching Ayurveda is really always leading with that compassionate middle ground approach and being super honest, right? Like we just put out our episode on coffee last week, and we were really honest with the effects that coffee can have and how that can contribute to certain imbalances. But can we find that middle ground? Can we meet people where they're at? Someone that I worked with recently who smokes cannabis fairly regularly, and we've been talking about how the drying and heating impacts of the cannabis are likely contributing to the dry heat pattern skin imbalances that they're experiencing. But they're not in this place of being ready to fully let that go. And so what we've done is we've come up with this little ritual before they consume cannabis, and they're like using nausea oil and they're drinking some coconut water, and we're bringing in some of those like cooling, moistening qualities. But what's super interesting is because they now have this little ritual before they consume, they're consuming less. Because it's like, oh, like someone's offering it to me, but my nausea is upstairs, or like it gives you that pause to check in and be like, okay, is this something I'm just doing because it's habitual, or do I actually mindfully want to engage in this habit right now? And yeah, I just think that that's something that can be so powerful and really change how we bring people into Ayurveda. So yeah, I'm just curious in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great points. And I think it does bring me back to that episode we did recently release on how to simply integrate Ayurveda, where it doesn't have to be this overhaul of your life and change everything that you know and be this whole different person. It's like these subtle couple small shifts here and there can make a really big impact on how you feel in your body and how well, like what it means to feel healthy in a different way. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it reminds me of when I was first starting my practice. So for the, other practitioners and counselors out there, I was wanting to give my clients so much. I was like, there's so much we can do. Like, here's the wellness plan. Here's all the things. It's just not possible. And, I kind of learned the hard way. And that is like, okay, this doesn't actually work for people. We need to start with like 2 or 3 things at a time. And that's it. Sometimes one thing at a time. I've had even clients where they just one thing at a time is what we start with, and we work with that and see how that feels. And I think it also helps us really get to know how these changes feel, to your point of even bringing attention to these habits that we have, pausing before we engage with them allows us to connect more intentionally with it and really be able to ask ourselves, am I enjoying this? Is this what I need? Is this what I want? What is this for me? What is that connection that's going on here? So I think it is super important. And it's something that is just so overlooked in our culture of those subtleties and really that misconception that, like, I think the labeling of, well, this is Ayurvedic and this is not, right? And I think that's something that in this podcast we're trying to provide clarity on, is that it's not really that one thing or the other. It's either Ayurveda or it's not Ayurveda, because Ayurveda has the potential to exist in everything we do or experience. Because if we're approaching our life and our movements and our habits with awareness and intention, that is Ayurveda.
Yes.
It's not like I eat the right thing or I do the right thing or I miss this thing. Like, that's not Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is that knowledge and science of life, and it's how we apply it to how we're connecting with the world around us. And all of that is subtle, right? It's not big. I think we expect our health to change with like one day you wake up and you did this massive thing and it's just going to have this huge impact on your health and like suddenly you're good to go. It's like all these small things over time really is what has the most profound impact on how we feel in our bodies and in our minds. So yeah, I think those are great examples of how it is actually applied in the real world. And as a practitioner and, working with clients is how we approach things, right? It is that strategy piece of, well, what works for this individual and how can we, you know, get to where you want to be or like
Hmm.
to what feels healthy for you. Because it is so individualized, which is the system itself. That's what Ayurveda is built on is individuality and honoring that.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I think that's also one of the benefits of understanding the constitutions of our clients as well, right? Because, like, I know how much I bring into a plan with a Vata versus a Pitta versus a Kapha. Like, there's definitely some themes there. But I was just gonna add the part you were saying about those small, subtle shifts adding up. There's a quote that I love that I'm always saying to clients, and it's corny, but I think that's why I love it is if we change the direction of a ship by just a couple degrees, we end up in a different destination. So, yeah, to your point, it's like those small, subtle shifts are what help us build these long lasting habit changes. And that's what really has this not only like substantial impact, but like a sustainable impact.
Mhm.
It creates a lifestyle that you can actually continue and enjoy and not have it be like this short term, thing that you're trying to force yourself into.
Yeah, and I think part of it is remembering that our bodies are self-healing,
Mm,
right? And like our physical being is a part of nature and we see nature as self-healing and we witness that happening, right? It makes sense when we see it in nature. So why don't we see it as making sense with our own bodies? Like
mm,
we've just been so accustomed and influenced to think that our body is not intelligent in
mm,
what it needs and what it's asking for.
mm.
And that's just not true.
Yeah.
And I think the piece towards that self-healing is allowing the body to have that space and have that time to allow it to do what it knows what it is meant to do.
Mm,
And there's that pausing. And I had this conversation with a client yesterday, and there's multiple areas that they're looking to address. And really, it was like, let's just sit here for a minute and breathe.
mm,
And after that minute, their whole energy just shifted. And they were like, oh, yeah, slowing down. And I was like, yes. That allows the body to catch up. It allows the mind to
mm,
catch up and not just catch up, but then do what it knows, what it's good at, what it's best at, which is
mm.
self-healing. So yeah, I love your examples in the workshop that you give and with that client specifically in that it can feel like such a barrier to people starting to learn Ayurveda is
Mm.
like, well, they can feel the depth of it. And then I think that scares them off a little bit. And so
Yeah.
hopefully these conversations in this podcast, like that's part of the purpose of why we started this was to offer that middle ground of like
Mm,
it can be an attainable thing without being like, I am now Ayurvedic.
mm.
There's so much in between. Simple things. Simple things.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a word that you used there that I'm going to bring back. You talked about like influence. It's so interesting to reflect on why we do the things we do and why we have the habits and the patterns that we do and how much our culture really plays a role in that. And I think that's really pertinent to today's topic, where today we're going to talk about aging well with Ayurveda. And Ayurveda offers some really powerful wisdom for how to age well and how to support longevity and not just how many years you're living, but really sustaining your vitality throughout your life, sustaining your mental vitality and your physical vitality to continue doing the things you love to do. And I think a big part of why we want to have this conversation and what drives it is I think, especially as women, we are so influenced and so bombarded with these different beliefs around aging and, this anti aging culture. And yeah, I have some thoughts on it, and I'm sure you do as well. I think this will be a fun episode to get a mix between like this really practical wisdom on how to actually support our vitality, not just the aesthetic, but our inner vitality. Also, I'm sure create some space for us to do our thing and rant.
Definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Really important conversation that is long overdue in this space, I think. Well, do you want to start us off with the stages of life in Ayurveda? I think we'll set a nice tone for this conversation.
Well, so we've been talking in past episodes about these three doshas, right? We have kapha, pitta, and vata, and we see this cycle of kapha, pitta, and vata throughout the seasons of the year, like kapha being winter and spring, and then pitta into summer, and vata uh, into fall and back into winter. And we also see that same cycle in our menstrual cycle. We talk in our digestion episodes of seeing that same cycle there. We also see that same cycle of doshas throughout our lifespan. So when we're born and throughout childhood is really considered the kapha time of life. So kapha being earth and water. So it's really this phase of life that is categorized by growth. It's all about building your foundation and physically and emotionally building your foundation and your stability. And then when we hit puberty and then like kind of puberty through adulthood, then we're in our pitta time of life. Pitta being fire and water, and pitta is really this energetic of transformation. So in this fiery time of life, we're creating and building and transforming, and that could be your job, a house, family, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe travel, whatever it may be. But this transformative time of life where you have a lot of energy and you're using that energy and creating something in the world. The last part of life, the vata stage of life, really starts with menopause in women, or around 50 or so. And that phase of life, the vata phase, vata is air and space. So it's really the energetics of wisdom and spiritual growth. And I think of it as you're sharing your gifts. You're sharing your gifts of wisdom and all that you've learned throughout your life with other people. And if we, really think physically about all of that and this transition we're having from kapha through vata, we're also moving towards lighter and drier qualities as well. So it's something that we're always thinking about with clients, is not just like their constitution and not just their current state of imbalance, but also that stage of life that we're in. And that's going to also impact the doshas in your body.
I think what's really helpful in thinking about these stages is even relating it to what your hormones are doing,
Mm,
right? And so in the kapha stage, you're like building and growing, and you're hitting puberty, and you're getting in that pre-hormone phase. They're kind of under the surface, like coming to surface as you transition from kapha into pitta stage and go through that puberty transition. And then you're in your bleed years. And, for women in their bleed years, similar time frame for men. I'm just going to use women as the example here. Then we have these, hormones. We're going through this monthly menstrual cycle while we're in this pitta stage of life for a number of years. And then the hormones start to drop off, right? And when we've talked about this in past episodes, in our menstrual cycle episodes, when those hormones drop off, we're losing that juiciness, that lubrication, that moisture in the body because the hormones are changing. The hormones are also moving through these same stages of life, and we're moving right alongside with them. So
mm,
it is interesting to relate it to exactly what's happening physically inside the body, and then also experiencing these emotional shifts and these other physical shifts relative to these stages of life. And I think where we kind of run into, I don't know, quote, trouble, maybe we'll say, or like notice some, things are more challenging or have imbalances, is when we're kind of fighting against these natural shifts. I think that's part of what we'll talk about today, is we're trying to almost stay in one phase and not really honor the phase that we're in.
sure.
And we see that a lot in the wellness culture, is this like push to stay young and stay youthful. And we'll get more into that in more depth. But I think honoring these stages can allow us to move through them with more celebration and really honoring them. And instead of kind of trying to fight them or work against them or stick to like, no, this is where I need to be,
Mm,
this is what I need to be doing, or this is it. It's like, how can we soften into the natural process that the body goes through?
mm. Yeah. And what does vitality look like in each of the different phases of life, right? Because it's a little different. How to support our bodies through aging. We're kind of planning ahead, like knowing that these next phases are to come, right? Knowing that the body is moving towards dryness and lightness as it moves towards vata. And so throughout the lifespan, throughout starting, in kapha and in pitta, especially in pitta phases, that's really how we're thinking about aging well with Ayurveda is we're bringing in the opposite qualities of dry and light. So we're bringing in things that are lubricating and hydrating and also things that are stabilizing, mentally and physically stabilizing. And so we think about how dryness manifests with aging. It can oftentimes be things like joint pain and stiffness, like the dryness of the joints. We don't have as much of that synovial fluid in the joints to support joint health. Constipation, like dryness of the colon. We can have vaginal dryness, which can be really impactful for a lot of things. And then of course wrinkles, right? And I think wrinkles are like an interesting conversation in itself because yes, it's an indication of dryness in the skin. It's also a big point of conversation in the many companies that can benefit from helping us reduce our wrinkles. And I think it's an interesting thing to reflect on in that yes, it's a natural part of aging. And also, if we're having early wrinkles, it can be this sign of excess dryness and lack of that hydration and lubrication. So it's like finding that balance there, right?
Yeah, it is really interesting to think about, even back to like my teenage years, how much I was bombarded, even at that age, use this skin cream and use this, don't get wrinkles. And the ironic part is that like a lot of these creams out there have chemicals in them and like, synthetics, and that's going to dry out and deplete your skin too. So yeah, it's this whole bombardment of misunderstanding this like natural process that happens in the body and these natural ways to support it. I think that's kind of the purpose of this. We're looking at those foundational concepts of Ayurveda where opposites create balance. And so if you're experiencing dryness, if you're experiencing wrinkles, let's increase blood flow, right? Let's bring in hydration, let's add some oil that's going to balance those qualities of dryness and depletion. I've consistently heard from, older generations of the dryness they experience and how achy it is when they get out of bed. Oh, as soon as I hit 45, every time I got out of bed, it was so much slower and I'm achy and my joints hurt. And there's ways that we can support that so that it doesn't feel that way. So you are lubricating the system and you're not experiencing that excess dryness, because essentially that's what that is, right? It's depletion in the body and in that tissue. It's hard to not be influenced by what we hear from these other sources and, parents and aunts and uncles, or like those other generations, like, oh, I'm so old now. Like, oh, I'm just aging and I want to be like, no, there's so much you could do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
while also honoring where you're at. And I think that's the part that gets kind of missed is, to your point, how we can be supporting this later stage, knowing we're moving towards that eventually, but without depleting ourselves. Like in the pitta stage, we see this a lot.
Yeah.
The pitta stage of life, especially for women, are experiencing burnout, right? Like they're essentially totally depleting themselves. So they're going into the dry stage of life already depleted, and they're going to experience those symptoms a lot faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And how you were describing like depleting ourselves in the pitta years, right? So we were talking about how the two main qualities that we're moving towards as we're aging is this dryness and then also this lack of stability, right? And so when we're depleting ourselves and we're overdoing it, we can think of, in most of those cases, we're really lacking in that mental stability. And I think that can again exacerbate those things that to some extent are normal to experience in the vata stage, but it can exacerbate it so much more. Things like scattered mind and poor focus and poor memory, insomnia, right? If we don't have that stability, that's even bringing in that physical stability. If there's too much excess lightness in the mind and the body, then we can experience this harder time falling asleep and staying asleep and poor balance and thinking of stability both from a physical and mental standpoint. And how important it is to really focus in on those two qualities, on the lubrication and the stability through the pitta years. Like this is the time to do it, because once vata hits, you can still do that, and we should still be working on those two things, but we want to be wanna be banking that up a little bit, especially the closer we move towards menopause. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've talked about this in other experiences leading up to your bleed. You're kind of
Mhm.
like banking up rest and reserves before going into bleeding, right? So it's kind of like making these small shifts so that we're not ending up depleted as we go into that further depletion. Like we're not starting from a place of depletion. So this is where that the lubrication piece becomes very important, right? If we're thinking about opposite qualities to dryness, we want to be applying heavy and dense and lubricating, right? So, and we've talked about this many times that Abhyanga, right, is one of the practices that is so beneficial and helps improve the longevity of our tissues. Essentially, is one of the, there's many benefits to Abhyanga, but that's definitely one of them. And if we think about what that's doing in the body, is it's adding this like protective, strengthening layer that allows things to move more easily. So if we think about like if a body is very dry and you try to move it, it's going to create friction, right? If you were to rub your hands together and they're dry, you're going to feel restriction there. But
Mhm.
if there's oil, you're going to be like, "Oh, I can like move my hands around with ease." And I think that's the point. We can think about that in our bones and our joints and our muscles. And so if we're feeling that stiffness and that tightness in our body, then that's an indication that there's not enough of that lubrication to help those things move more easily. Then we're also thinking about the internal application. And so the foods that we're eating, the quality of the foods, right? Or think about if you eat a dry cracker, it's going to suck out moisture from your body, right? It's going to go through your digestive system and like pull out moisture because the cracker is so dry. So I almost think about it as like the body is looking for that state of harmony where it doesn't have to dry out or get too overly wet, right? It's kind of that nice middle ground. So if you're having more dryness, balancing that with the foods that are more hydrating, even avocado and soups and foods that are going to provide moisture and lubrication as opposed to foods that are going to take it away when you put it in
Mhm.
the body. Ghee is one that we talk about very often too, which deserves its own episode at some point. Uh, but ghee is a great way to also lubricate the tissues internally.
Yeah, I've had people ask me before, like, why is Ayurveda so obsessed with soupy foods? And there's like so much, the kitchery and the soups and so on. And I think this is really a big reason why. And traditional Chinese medicine actually has very similar views on this, is that we want to get hydrated from our food. And it doesn't mean that every single meal, every time of the year has to be that way, but how much of a difference that makes, right? If we're getting that hydration in. And I think we've talked about this before, but it's such a misconception that I think it's worth mentioning again, that hydration is not just about water intake or liquid intake, right? In Ayurveda, we're oftentimes, when we're talking about dryness, the opposite is not just liquid, it's oleation, it's oil, it's ghee, it's, getting these substances in the body that are coating the tissues. And I really liked your description with the hands and the friction piece. If we did that with just water, right, as compared to oil, like thinking of the different feel there, it's again something that we are trying to just make those little things habit. So then we're not having to think about it so often, but bringing in those hydrating properties in food can really add up in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it makes a big difference. And I've seen it make a big difference with clients. And to your point with water, I had a client I was working with last year who was drinking like 90 ounces of water a day and
Hmm.
having constipation.
Hmm.
And we talked about electrolyte balance and we talked about oil and we talked about these other factors because she was flushing electrolytes out of her system and like throwing off that balance, which affects your kidneys and which affects your adrenals. And like it is all
Hmm.
connected to what we were addressing at the beginning of this is there's a lot of trends out there in the quote wellness industry that aren't individualized and looking at how is it actually working for your body, not just you need to drink as much water as possible every day, right? Like that's bypassing some of these other factors of like body function. Yeah, and water I think is an interesting one because we think we're hydrating, but if we think about, just like you said, if you're washing your hands a lot too, your hands are going to be dry. I remember when I was working in restaurants, I would always have cracked skin and like bloody knuckles because my hands were so dry because I was always washing them and it really showed on my skin. So water does not necessarily equal hydration in the way that I think we've been taught.
Yeah, and maybe this is a tangent here, but when you were describing the hand washing, I was also thinking about soap. And I think that's one of the reasons why traditionally, and it's always going to be a little different for different cases, but Ayurveda would recommend doing this abhyanga, right? This like oil massage before your shower to support your muscles, support your joints, get that moisture locked into the skin. And then we're really only using soap in the body parts that need it, right? And in those maybe more intimate areas or so on. And that can be really alarming to people. Like, what do you mean? I'm not going to soap my whole body. But soap can be so drying. And that's when I've worked with people with dry skin and they've made that transition. It's such a game changer. So yeah, I think that's an important note too when we're talking about those drying factors.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should have a whole one on body care, but shampoos with chemicals and synthetics and fragrances in there that are all stripping your hair of its natural oils. A
Yeah.
topic for another day, but something to think about relative to this conversation. Looking at like the sources and the products that we're using that may be having a bigger impact on our skin and our body that we might just be used to using.
Yeah, and so we're lubricating, right,
Mhm.
externally with the oils, be mindful of the oils of our hair, our skin, the oils we're putting in our body, the ghee, always ghee.
Always, always
And
ghee.
and then the stability piece. I think when I
Right.
also am thinking about aging well, we talked about stability. So physical stability, I think of yoga, I think of weightlifting, in general, exercise. Like I worked with a PT once who used to always say motion is lotion, right? Like the movement that we have. I know you said that. What makes you laugh about that?
I've just heard like athletes say it before, and it just kind of cracks me up. Motion is lotion. I don't know. It's such a funny saying to me. I don't know. Yeah, tell me your thoughts on it.
Well, it's always, yeah, I don't know. It's always just it's something that stuck with me because I've actually said that to my parents a lot because I'm always trying to get them moving a bit, and like they have a lot of joint pain and knee pain and shoulder pain, and I'm like, well, we gotta move those joints in order to create more of that fluid in those joints. Yeah, it is kind of a funky phrase, I guess.
If you are enjoying this conversation, it would mean the world to us and help support our work if you'd like, share, leave a review, as well as subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you use. If you're looking for more connection or would like to support this podcast, we'd love to have you join our Patreon for $5 a month. Here you'll get bonus episodes and access to our community chat Q&A.
And don't forget to check out our wellness library, which is filled with self-guided classes, kitchen tutorials, herbal recipes, and more Ayurvedic practices, all for just $5 a month. Check out the link in the show notes. And then mental stability, right? Like meditation, pranayam. You were talking about how when so often in this Pitta phase of life, it's this transformative time and this fire that has this capability of transformation and clarity and all these amazing gifts so often becomes a bonfire and we're burnt out. Right. So it's like, what can we bring in of those mental practices to support our mental stability as we age? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I relate that so much to our nervous system. If we think about nerve tissue specifically, it's really juicy and it's squishy. And to maintain that, we want to take care of our nervous system by slowing down and having that meditation and those grounding practices that allow our nervous system to feel grounded and to feel safe, allows that juiciness to flow and to be present. Whereas when we're really depleted is when we're kind of drying out our nervous system.
Yeah.
So, I think about it in that sense where our nervous system is very much connected to our adrenals and to our hormones and to our cortisol and to all of these other, daily body functions that even these mini moments of like finding stability or finding groundedness is impacting the amount of juiciness that we have in our body.
Yeah. I always like the word juiciness when we're
Yeah. Yeah, me
that's
too.
the main goal. Like we keep saying like lubrication, but let's stick with juiciness. We're trying
I
to
think it's juicy.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we feel it too. Like,
Yeah.
there's certain times of the month where I feel more juicy than others, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about that in our menstrual cycle episodes, and it's just paying attention to when you feel that and when you don't. Maybe to add another layer, when I'm feeling, depleted or burnt out, I don't feel juicy
Mm.
and steady. I feel dry and depleted and anxious. And I think that paying attention to that can also be that indication of what foods to bring in a little bit. Oh, okay, I'm gonna like turn to my ghee and I'm gonna turn to my avocado and my soups and those things. Yeah, it can be like that mental connection can inform you in these other areas, including what you're eating and how you're moving.
And the other thing I was thinking as you were describing that, so two things. One is just acknowledging that it's always a dance, right? We're like never going to fully be in our juicy, grounded selves all the time. So it's always this dance of like coming back to that, coming back to that. But the other thing that I think is worth noting is that your constitution can play a big role here, right? Whereas kapha constitutions are going to be, every constitution has their own things they're prone to. But when we're specifically talking about aging, they naturally can hold on to that juiciness easier than vatas and pittas. And so I think vata and pitta constitutions perhaps need to bring these practices in a little bit more frequently and be a little bit more mindful whenever you're somebody who you're naturally prone to dryness, you're naturally prone to heat, you're naturally prone to mobility, your scatteredness. Knowing that and moving towards this phase, it's like that extra layer of wanting to bring in some support for yourself.
Yeah, totally. And I think that having that awareness can be helpful in knowing, like, okay, I'm a Pitta constitution, so I'm going to be more prone to an earlier perimenopause
Mm.
than other people, right? Then, like, a Kapha constitution may not experience perimenopause until like 5, 10 years later. And so I think, part of this conversation is one, acknowledging the different stages of life and honoring them where you're at. And also, the other part of it is supporting them through practices that are in alignment with your constitution. And it's not this, well, if you use Ayurveda, you can like fight the system to not get wrinkles earlier, right? Like, I think it's kind of this balance. Like, yes, we're going to be more prone to these dry type imbalances, but we're not trying to like stop them from happening necessarily. It's creating a better balance for shifting as we age and move into this different stage of life.
Yeah, I think it's like this balance of we're accepting, yes, I'm in the Vata stage of life, especially if I'm a Vata constitution, like dryness is going to be a thing in your life, but there are tools that we can use to help take that down a notch and help support the body through that inevitable phase that it's moving towards and moving through. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to bring language to like people kind of using it as an excuse,
I get you. Yeah.
and just like, oh, you're just this age and this is what happens, and like kind of just writing it off.
Yeah.
And I think that can be very disempowering for people because then they're like, oh, this is just inevitable. I'm going to like feel like crap when I hit, 45
Mm.
and I just don't resonate with that. Like I think there's a way to feel good at any stage of life.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the piece that I feel is important to share. And same with our menstrual cycle conversations. Like, I feel like there's a lot of overlap because we're looking at these cycles and rhythms and systems. We're all prone to imbalance at any of these stages. And we can, have that awareness that it's happening and want to make a change to support it in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to just in general reflect on our relationship with aging as a society because I guess our relationship with aging is in some ways a reflection of our relationship with our own mortality, right? And I think just from working in hospitals for 13 years, it's become very apparent to me as a society how much we just really don't have a good relationship with that. And I think that as a reflection there, it can sometimes lead to different phases of denial with aging, right? Or like we're kind of ignoring certain things. I think that's like what can result in like, oh, I'm just getting old versus like really connecting with, yeah, like I am getting old, right? Like, yeah, this is this really real change that my body's going through, but like, how can I work with that? How can I support that? And obviously, we're coming at this conversation. I'm 37. Are you 39, Brittany?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, like,
totally.
we'll meet
Yeah.
again in 20 years and see if our views change. But yeah, totally get what you're saying. And I think it's something where it's important for us all to be in reflection of how we can support ourselves, because I do think that the need for supporting ourselves just increases with age, right? Like I could get away with a whole lot in my 20s that I can't now. And I'm sure that every single decade that's truer and truer.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear our conversation in 20 years and what we have to say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other direction that I really wanted to take this conversation, we've kind of touched on this, is really just specifically as women, can we just get together and redefine what it means to age well? Right? Even as someone who's constantly trying to unlearn what we've been taught in so many aspects. And like you were saying, this bombardment we've had our whole lives with skincare and makeup and all these different things to make us look younger. When you say the words like aging well, the first thing that comes to mind is like wrinkle-free skin, right? Or
Yeah.
like voluminous hair or like a fit body. And so just reflecting on this and thinking about how powerful it could be if we really try to change that. And if aging well, yeah, maybe there's like some level of a physical piece in terms of feeling good in your body, not having that like stiffness and pain in your body. But also, what if aging well was a term that was used when women are setting boundaries and when women are learning to speak their truth? And when women are just like becoming a more authentic version of yourself. Like, what if we started saying, like, ooh, she's aging well, right? I just think language is so powerful. And I don't know, I'm sure you have a lot to add to that, but it's just something I've really, ever since that thought came through, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it and just really wanting to culturally, collectively change our language around that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Yeah, it's so important because I think that that's just another indication of how we've been shaped and molded to think that like aging well has to do with aesthetics. And I think to your point, especially what I've seen and I'm sure you've seen in working one-on-one with clients is how many women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that we're seeing that aren't setting boundaries for themselves and
Mm,
that aren't speaking their truth and like don't know who they are. And that's because there's been so much other energy and focus put onto these other things that are more ego driven.
mm,
And we're taught to value those over our own voice
yeah.
and what's important to us and our own inner value and wisdom. And so I completely agree with you. And I think that this is an amazing way to reframe this. And I hope that this conversation trickles out there into the world because this is so important. And this was something that I personally resonate with because a lot of my upbringing was not this. It was setting boundaries was looked at as being selfish.
Mm,
Even coming from that piece of it, it took me so long to figure out who I was.
mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that I did at the time that I did. I think there's a timing and a path to every journey as it unfolds. But I'm so grateful to have that now and to move through my life with this knowledge and with this purpose as opposed to feeling, well, I have to be beautiful and I have to, have wrinkle-free skin. But I'm more like, am I honoring myself today?
Mm,
Right? Am I showing up for myself today? And that is where your energy goes.
yeah.
And so you get to decide, where do you want your energy to go? Is it external or internal?
Mm,
And where is that, what's that moving you towards? Is
yeah.
it in alignment with your purpose and the person that you're sharing with the world?
Yeah. 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 And there's also nothing wrong with caring about the aesthetic, right? I know you and I feel similarly here too, that like, I think of it as we're honoring beauty, right? Like using makeup or doing our hair or dressing in fun outfits. Like there's that's beautiful. That's a great practice. It's fun, like to adorn yourself, right? And if we look at getting dressed up in that way, I'm adorning myself versus I'm trying to use makeup to fix or hide or something of that nature. It's a really different feeling in the body to have
Yeah.
those two different things. But also, I was listening to something recently and they were essentially saying, I've always said there's certain things I do it for myself, like my hair, like my makeup, whatever it is, like I'm just doing it for me. And they were essentially questioning with how much we have been inundated our whole lives. Like, how do you know, right? Like, how do you know when it's for you? And how do you know how much has just been ingrained in us of how we dress or move or put ourselves together? So, yeah, I just think it's an interesting thing to reflect on. I'm probably getting a little bit too esoteric there, but I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece is like the intention behind it.
Yeah.
And I guess that clarity probably comes with practice and experience and how it feels when you actually do it, right? And
Hmm.
just to continue with like the makeup example, do you enjoy going through that process? Do you enjoy shopping for makeup? Do you enjoy finding makeup that you like? Like it's not just like putting on makeup. Your energy's going into many different places to put makeup on.
Mm,
So it's not just the act of putting it on your skin um, or your body. It is how you're intentionally sourcing. And that's all energy you're putting out into the world. So I think try it and see how it feels and like get connected with yourself. And that goes back to your point of, are you connected to who you are?
mm,
Are you connected to your purpose and your alignment and your values? Because I think if we can connect with those, we're going to make decisions that feel in alignment with them. Not
mm.
all the time because we're human, but we're going to be able to have that awareness so that if we do something out of alignment, we have the ability to reflect on that and make a change.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the gift of aging, right? It's allowing us the time and the space and the experience to figure out who we are, to figure out what our values are, to figure out, what our actual, true, authentic voice is. And I think that's the other piece of all of this is the language that we're using of also bringing in language of what a gift it can be to age, right? What a gift it can be to shift how you're presenting to the world or just shift how you're feeling about things or to care less about what other people are thinking or worry more about how you're making other people feel or how other people are perceiving you. Like it's such a gift to move through that with each decade. And to me, like that's aging well, right? Is the more that we're peeling off those layers, that's aging well.
Yeah. And knowing and trusting that showing up authentically for yourself also means you're attracting those kinds of people to your
Mm.
energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so not
Yeah.
being afraid of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I met a friend through yoga here, and so we don't know each other well. Like, I just kind of see each other in class and chat. And I've noticed really over, gosh, probably like a year's period of time that her clothes and just like overall aesthetic was getting more like colorful, and she'd wear like big earrings and have these different glasses frames, and so I eventually said something. I'm like, I just really love your style lately and you're so colorful. And she essentially was like, yeah, I finally come to a place in life where I'm not just dressing to make my body look smaller or to fit a certain style, and I'm just buying things that make me happy.
Mm.
And it's really sat with me and it's inspired me, and it's inspired me to get a little bit more colorful in what I choose to wear as well. And I just think that's again such a beautiful example of aging well, and like such a gift of aging is to just come into that more authentic space. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, go out there and age well.
Yeah, set your boundaries, eat your ghee.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
your yoga.
exactly. Yeah. Find that inner vitality and let it shine.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, thanks for this conversation. I think this is been kind of long overdue and an important one to have. Is there anything else that you want to add or that we missed?
No, this feels complete. Yeah, but I'm glad we
Yeah.
had it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Rita.
Yeah. Thanks, Brittni.
If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world to us and help support our work if you'd like, share, leave a review, as well as subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you use. If you're looking for more connection or would like to support this podcast, we'd love to have you join our Patreon for $5 a month. Here you'll get bonus episodes and access to our community chat Q&A.
And don't forget to check out our wellness library, which is filled with self-guided classes, kitchen tutorials, herbal recipes, and more Ayurvedic practices, all for just $5 a month. Thanks so much for being here with us. Until next time, be well.